Kia ora, g'day. Welcome back once again here with part 2 of my reaction to Mr. Harry Moffitt with Mark Boris on the Straight Talk podcast. So let's jump back in.
Not sure it would fly well here. I get the idea. We want to be proactive, I guess, in maybe at war rather than being defensive and on the back foot. And I heard a bit more. I think Hegseth punched out a semi-poem or something like that to romance Donald. But I don't know that it would make a marked difference on recruiting, or that would have to play out. I think what's important to state is during times of peace, recruiting naturally goes down. The boys that turn out to want to go on the adventures and go to war seem to spike when that's imminent or in the news. I've had a few people say, or ask me the question, is the Australian Defence Force in trouble and recruiting's down and all the rest of it? And I'd say, look, it's never as bad as it seems and never as good as it seems, and we probably need a more moderate conversation about it. But
I like that. It's never as bad as it seems, and it's never as good as it seems. Some wisdom in them. I've just got my mind racing for a minute, just with regards to those comments that he just mentioned.
It's a lot of money to sustain a standing army that's not doing anything and not going anywhere. And if the example I give is at the end of World War One. A lot of the old guys were saying, because a lot of men died in World War One, and they were having a shot at the next generation coming through, saying they're all soft and weak, and they need to be trained up, and things like scouts and outward bound, and these Wilberforce and all these other things were invented to toughen up the next generation. And when the 16 and 18-year-olds went off to Kokoda Track, they did a pretty bloody good job. And the young chargers I see come into contact with regularly, I think Australia's in good stead. I don't think we should panic. If we do need to raise an army, we'll do so. Our capability's still strong. This is the time to spend a bit of money on the hardware. And I think
hardware being tech.
Yeah, tech and hardware and some decent chips and things like that.
Yeah.
Man, Moff is, clearly intelligent, but very measured and articulate, calm with his wording and the way he's just described things there. No need to panic with regards to whatever. I don't know what's going on in Australia, if people are panicking or concerned or worried, but there's peaks and troughs in anything with regards to recruitment and numbers either being down or not being quite where people might like them. It is what it is. Things will swing around and kick back up again as and when and if they need to. That's my take anyway.
But I think I think we should just calm the farm a little bit on that. I think the essence of the Australian soldier is still here, and we'll serve our country well come the time.
So Harry, do you think that essence that you're talking about cuts across the Australian values? Do you think, because is that essence an Australian value? And given our immigration and our change in the sort of the makeup of our nation, and it's rapidly changing, probably faster now than it's ever done in its past, in terms of cultural changes, sense of nationalism, perhaps religious relationships. Like at one stage, we were pretty much a Christian nation. These days, we're much more mixed. Then there's conflict overseas relative to some of the religions relative to other religions, and it's pretty obvious who we'll be talking about, who I might be talking about or thinking about at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you think these things will ultimately create a bit of a chasm in our armed forces, our military?
Yeah, potentially. I think there's parts of the military which have been maybe distracted by what's going on out in society. So I give that. But, to fill and to have a strong standing Australian army, we need about 100,000 people. And I think there's well inside that many to service our military. And we'll always, remember we're a small nation. our GDP and defence is tiny. It's probably the budget of the 1st Marine Division, and we're now one of America's, if not biggest, aircraft carrier, and the Marines are increasing in numbers. So I think, again, there are challenges. There's no doubt, Mark, from a broader society perspective. But I think I would like to see the kind of margins and the fringes discussions that I see in the veteran community going on, just kind of keep our powder dry. I think we should take comfort that we will still be able to raise a strong army that will do its job.
So do we need, and I mean, this is probably more a war strategy question, and I don't know if I'm overstepping the mark here, but because you're an on the ground guy, you're the guy who goes and does stuff like in a more tactical, and you undertake a strategic outcome, but you got to have to make changes.
Yeah, the SAS is a strategic tool, a strategic,
and you go in there, but you got to make changes. You got to say, "Oh shit, this didn't work out the way we wanted to work out. We've got to do this tactically," and then make some quick change, quick thinking, and as a group. Do you think that we need as many regular soldiers, regular military people, as we have done in the past, given, I'm not talking about SAS, I'm not talking about specialised people, I'm talking about regular guys and girls. Do you think we need as many these days, given what's going on, given what we see in Ukraine, what we're seeing in various other places, what's going on in the world at the moment, as we have needed in the past? In other words, drones and all those other things. So is the world war potentially more technological?
Well, definitely. It got technological very quickly back in the US Civil War. So that doesn't change. I think that's expected strategically, no matter what conflict we go into. There's probably a good point to make here around the type of war that we might be engaged in. The wars that we've had recently, and arguably since the end of World War II, have been wars of choice, really. They haven't been wars that we've been invaded, or we've chosen to accompany America or a coalition or UK, and they've been largely wars of choice. So they have a different context and a different requirement, especially when we're being asked for certain capabilities to travel overseas. And then there's wars like Ukraine, where that's not a war of choice for Ukraine. That's a war that arrives on one's doorstep, and you need to do whatever you've got to do. And I don't think it's controversial to say that they find themselves in a pretty conventional situation, and they need warm bodies. It kind of comes down to that. The technology matters, and it's been amazing to watch that, hasn't it? The adaptation and the little drone shops underground and whatnot. I've been fascinated by that. That's just human adaptability. But at the end of the day, they need warm bodies defending a line, dug in, and it takes you back to,
Man, it's awesome listening to Harry speak, and just the way he's describing these. I need warm bodies, technology, acknowledging it. I know that there's been a few people on my channel that have said, SF is obsolete and ground force soldiers are obsolete, or they're soon to be obsolete. Technology and drones and the advancement of modern warfare and technology today is where it's at, etc., etc. I've not been swayed or convinced by that personally. I think I've responded to a number of those comments saying, hey, definitely acknowledge the advancements in technology and modern warfare and the use of it. It's always been evolving, and countries, units, you name it, are always looking to try to get some type of advantage. But, man, Moff has just hit the nail on the head. As far as I'm concerned, in terms of where we're at still in this current day and age, still need warm bodies, still need, human beings, doing the work, holding the front line was the term that he mentioned. And you don't have to go far on the internet to come across footage in regard to the Ukraine war that's happening and stuff at the moment that has been happening for a long time. Man.
The US Civil War, where they started digging in, and that's that was the precursor.
So it takes me back to Breaking Morant. The first thing I think of, remember the Australian movie Breaking Morant?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And I think that was like in the Boer War or something.
It was, yeah.
And which is like 1890 or somewhere like 19th century anyway.
That's right. Yeah.
And it was a very famous movie for those people who haven't watched it. A great movie, one of the great films that Australia government was actually able to, well, South Australian government was able to help fund, but they were sitting in trenches, and in those days, communication was done by a runner.
That's right.
Now communication might be slightly different, but
well, interestingly, in the Ukraine, K phones, so it's a landline.
Yeah. It's like a box with a wire.
That's
so
right.
Let's call it.
And they're targetable, and they're being used because there's EMF, electronic magnetic pulses, and all this type of stuff being used, blanketing out communications. Conventional communication. There's runners are being used
still,
and notes. So in the battle space, the forward edge of the battle area, the FIBA as it was called, in those trenches, there's notes and runners being used between pits and those types of things. So comms cord, you might never have heard of that, but 3 tugs means it's safe to come, and so all these in a conventional war that's not of our choosing, you don't get to use the full remit of technology and capability because there's an enemy that's just or the equal of yours.
Certainly got to make that presumption.
Buffering that, yeah.
You can't make any other presumption because more likely you could be wrong, and the gravity of that is a big deal.
Exactly, and so those wars of choice that I've been involved in, and
so which wars have you been? Where have you gone?
So I've served in the big 3: Timor, Afghanistan, and Iraq over 11 over a period about a dozen deployments, and then other missions and other activities around the globe.
And what was your role, so to speak?
So I started off as a 6IC and then ended up running a troop. So I was in a team, and I was the shit kicker, the junior guy in 1991, and then I was in the unit until pretty much till 2017. In 2015, I finished up on the teams as a team commander, or our Bravo, the senior sergeant role in the.
So I'm 1991 to 2017, I think in maybe, so somewhere between there, during that time from when he got to the regiment and was serving, he took a break. I don't know if he talks about it in here, and I won't delve into all the details of it, but he took a break. He was out of the unit for a while. And then, as I've mentioned, I think I might have mentioned it in my first reaction, but I've spoken about Harry and a couple other ones. He came back to the unit, and it just happened to be whilst I was on cycle with a bunch of other really good guys, and he joined us for parts of our cycle. Wasn't very long, and then he was away back into a squadron, and it might have been the squadron that he used to be in before he got out the first time.
We're talking SAS,
correct?
Yeah. So, what would your maybe the role is probably not the right word. What would your function be of your unit? Would be to go and do something, catch someone. Is surveillance what would have been?
Yeah, all of those things and more. So we are a special missions unit. So we greet or we address missions without precedent. So
what's
often that means that problems and attacks on or threats to the national capability and national interests of Australia without precedents. Whether that's by terrorists, whether it's technical, humans, war fighting, all of those things. So I've worked everything from one up by myself in the streets of some shitty city in the world to.
But what would your mission be? Would it be to capture someone or to watch someone?
Yeah, might be surveillance or something along those lines. To related to information and people, and then everything through to working as a 30-man troop on a more conventional direct attack or direct a more direct activity, jumping out of helicopters and blowing things in. The SAS gets a bit confused at times by the imagery we see
movies
and the movies, and it makes us look very one-dimensional, but we're not. We're anywhere, anything, anytime force, and everything that encapsulates.
Do you have?
And the beauty about that as well is that a number of people, at least in New Zealand and Australia, and from what I gather and have seen in the UK as well, where things kicked off, they draw from a pool of largely conventional soldiers, regular force soldiers, maybe some TF sprinkled in there, as I've mentioned. Maybe on the rare occasions, a civilian or two might get through selection and or be badged as part of that process if they progress. Interesting, one of the comments on one of my lives that I did recently, I think just the other day or a few days ago now, person spoke about Jamie Pinnell in his interview. He's saying when he retired in 2015, that as far as he was aware, he wasn't aware of any civilians that had gone through past selection and or gone through from having passed selection to go on to be badged as a member in the unit. So that gives you a bit of an insight. Yep, that's 10 years ago from when Jamie retired, but I'd say not a lot has changed. And people getting through, like I said, selection is just one stage gate. Everybody that's gone through selection that has gone on and then has been badged and then has served in the unit has all said selection was the easy part. So yeah, selection's tough, don't get me wrong. I found them hard. I found New Zealand hard. I found Australian hard. But having gone on and having had the privilege to serve, looking back, I can say my own personal experience, selection was definitely and truly was the easy part in comparison to life in the regiment. So it's cool hearing Moff talk about this. Some interesting questions from the host here, Mark. So anyway, we'll crack back into this interview.
In the course to become, apart from being able to prove that you can, you're not going to panic when you go underwater or whatever those things you see in the TV.
Sorry, I just realised I didn't even carry on finishing off adding the comments that I was wanting to when I paused it the first time, was in regards to the drawing from a pool of conventional soldiers. And by and large, I think the vast majority, at least in NZ and probably in Australia, likely have some sort of combat trade, like infantry background. They go in there. I don't think they're not, in my time anyway, they weren't predominantly made up of people from other corps. So Harry spoke about in my first reaction, that he joined up as a signalman. So comms, communication, and they can have combat application and roles. Obviously communications is critical. But at least during my time, signals wasn't necessarily seen as a combat role, as probably the way it is today. I think it's even more so seen as a combat role today, or one of the combat roles. But it wasn't in my time anyway. So drawing from that, and when Harry said and spoke about they're a unit that are ready to go anytime, anywhere, regardless of what the job is, you're drawing on those experiences that you have from people that come from the regular parts of the Army, of the Defence Force, and typically the conventional fighting forces. So being able to go from, like Harry said, he was involved in one-up tasks out on the streets in some places, to small man teams, 2 man, 3 man, 4, 5, 6 man. His 6IC comment is just sixth in charge or sixth in command, being basically the most junior person, which we all go through. Everybody goes through that, and being in that position as you make your way, or if you're fortunate enough to make your way into the unit.
TV shows.
Yep.
Apart from those things, in the learning process, what skills do they teach you apart from how to shoot and all those sort of things? But like obviously unarmed combat, whatever. But what other skills do they teach you, like engineering skills, or you do a little bit of everything?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. Computer skills, code writing, language skills, right up to paramedicine, surgery, all the weapons, all the things that go bang. We do high altitude parachuting, which is everything, if you can imagine that as at its extreme, jumping from an airplane at 25,000 feet at night, wearing 500 kilos worth of kit.
Sounds like a lot.
It's a lot. And, you're jumping on oxygen. So it's a highly technical, highly high risk.
Hang on, did he just say 500 kilos worth of kit? I think maybe it was meant to say something else. I don't know about 500 kilos worth of kit. It might have just been a slip of the tongue. Might have not realised. I know I've done that a few times talking about things. But yeah, I don't think I don't think any operator will be jumping out with 500 kilos worth of kit on them. You may be jumping out after kit have gone off on bundles and following those down. I don't know about that happening from the high altitude. Maybe I never did high altitude jumps, but yeah, I think 500 kilos worth of kit was probably just a slip of the tongue. Let me just go back and see in case I've misheard it.
We do high altitude parachuting, which is everything, if you can imagine that as at its extreme, jumping from an airplane at 25,000 feet at night, wearing 500 kilos worth of kit.
Sounds like a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, he said wearing 500 kilos worth of kit. So I think that's a slip of the. I don't see it. I don't think anybody's wearing 500 kilos worth of kit.
And you're jumping on oxygen, so it's a highly technical, highly high risk event. To rebreathing underwater, diving underwater, and submarine release. And one thing Australia is really well renowned for is our long range vehicle patrols and capability. And all those three things, amongst others, they're really only means to get to the job. The majority of the SAS work is done in infill and extraction. The job itself is a whole other set of skills, and that's whether we take the expert and get them there safely, or we bring the skills and execute the mission on the ground as required.
Are you talking about that transport vehicle that I can't remember the name of it now, but we've sent quite a few of them to the Ukraine, I think.
Oh yeah, the ASLabs, I think.
I can't remember the bloody name myself either. But but Australia's good at building those things. Is that because of our terrain?
Yeah, I think so. I think we were getting IED strikes in Afghanistan regularly and surviving a lot of them. So I think there was a technology that just evolved in a local place, and that's had a asymmetric kind of impact, or certainly interest from around the world, and that technology spread. It's just V-shaped hulls. So I guess
at the bottom of the transport machine,
it still goes bang inside. Don't worry about that. Yeah. But the vehicles, it's survivable, more survivable.
It disperses the vibration,
That's
the impact.
Right. Yeah, the impact. Yeah.
So because you experienced it yourself, IEDs.
That's right. In 2000, I unfortunately was in 2008 drove over an IED, which turned out what we think was an old Russian anti-tank mine that was remote detonated, and a colleague of mine was killed beside me, and our interpreter effectively lost both of his legs in the blast. So it was very traumatic, and it's remarkable to think out of the dozens of strikes that we had in Afghanistan on the cars that we drove, very few deaths. I think we had 2 or 3, I think it was, over that time. A lot of injuries, etc., but high survivability. They weren't the vehicles. We had our own set of vehicles.
And what happened?
Man, just sorry, we'll let this carry on first.
To you? Did anything happen to you?
Yeah, I had frag through the back of both legs and burnt. Actually, the force blew a boot off, an army boot off, just to give you an idea of the force, which you don't need much idea really, I guess. And I was actually okay. I had a bit of surgery and came back to the troop, but I contracted an infection. Most of Afghanistan's covered in human feces and animal feces.
Really?
And yeah. Well,
it's not like they've got bathrooms, lavatory systems.
They haven't had a huge sanitary advance there, but and they use it for fertilizer. Actually, to be fair to them, they reuse it for fertilizer. These are pretty humble existences. And so I got a staph infection, a golden staph infection that kind of got up into my
in Afghanistan.
Yeah, it started there.
Yeah,
and I had to be repatriated in the end because it just that my testicles were swollen up to the size of a soccer ball, and it started to get into my thoracic cavity, and they were going to remove my leg, but they got onto some heavy drugs back in Perth. I was back just in time, thankfully, and over weeks it calmed down.
Damn, man. Nuts. But just listening to that, and the mindset and the mentality of the guys, not only Harry, but the other guys in his team, to this. I think he said that happened, one of the ones that he recalls that he was involved in, I think he said 2008. He didn't retire till 2017. Not only the physical resolve to bounce back from that, because obviously he went through a bit of stuff as well, had the tragic loss of life of one of his teammates. The interpreter lost effectively both of their legs. He's been injured badly as well, contracted a staph infection, which is making its way up through his body, which, that can be deadly if not treated. Sounds like he almost lost his leg. So again, not only the physical courage, resolve, resilience, whatever you want to call it, to get yourself back to being operationally ready, which he did, but then to go back, to go, yep, here I am, Harry and his team and the guys there putting up their hand, yep, here I am, send me back, I'll go back again and again and again and again. So 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, another 9 years. Another 9 years of just dedicated service. It gives you and we, hopefully a bit of an idea of the caliber of people, in my opinion, and Harry being one of them, as I look at him and as I've had the privilege to serve with him, although we didn't end up in the same squadron, the caliber of people that are there within those units and the willingness to be prepared to risk it all if need be, if the situation calls for it. What's that? Still got time. I'm going to let it carry on.
In Perth, I was back just in time, thankfully, and over weeks it calmed down.
And would that have been a signal to you? Maybe it's time now I'll hang the boots up a bit.
Yeah, well, I was 40 at that age.
Is it a retirement age? Do they sort of say, mate, 40 is it?
There's two retirement ages. One is around 55 or so.
Yeah.
And the other one's the more realistic one, is when the young fellas say, Harry, fuck off. It's time for you to go. You were a bit slow. And a few times towards the end of my time, the guys did turn around and say, mate, you're looking a bit slow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you do.
Straight up.
Yeah, and your ego wants not to hear that. But
slow in terms of keeping up, you mean?
Yeah, definitely keeping up. Yeah.
Like you mean with the backpack and all the gear?
Absolutely, yeah. When you're getting gunshots fired, you need everybody up in the line. And I never fell off or let anyone down, but there was a sense that it was harder than it should have been.
And is that their job to tell you that? Like,
I think it's all of our jobs to tell each other that. It's,
You're going to get worded up. I think I've touched on that in other videos. The lads are pretty good at letting you know if you're not meeting the standard, if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. But a lot of them as well, and I could only imagine the way some of those guys likely would have spoken to Harry, because of the way Harry is and the way he conducts and carries himself. Even now, the same when I look at him and when I had the privilege to interview him, he's still the same. Very humble, very respectful, very intelligent, etc., etc. I have no doubt that the guys in his troop, in his patrol, in his troop, in his squadron, if they felt that they needed to let him know, they would have, but they would have come to him respectfully. I have no doubt about that. But I hope that's the case, because he might shoot me down and go, well, actually, they just bloody... But to be fair as well, they'll be, in that unit, there's not any malice meant by it. Nobody's, at least my experience, nobody was gunning to try to like out in the corporate civilian world, nobody's gunning to try to take your position. They would just tell you very matter of fact, very blunt, very direct, if you needed to lift your game up. And I didn't see anything wrong with that. I thought that was the normal way to communicate, until I bloody come out into Civvy Street and started, I guess, communicating in a similar way, not realizing how blunt and direct I was with a number of people, and then being called in for some meetings. So I've needed to try to learn to adapt and change my language, even the use of cursing, swear words and all that sort of stuff. I used to swear a heck of a lot when I was in the army and infantry, and even before selection, and maybe even during. Maybe I started to drop off with being a bit more mindful of the language when I was on the cycle in NZ, and then definitely, so over time, even whilst I was in the army, I started trying to adapt my language, and that that definitely helped. Put it this way, it definitely helped when I come out onto Civvy Street. But anyway, let's come back to Harry with regards to what he's talking about.
The SAS regiment's a prison yard you get to go home from. It's brutal, and but there's a camaraderie and respect. You don't have to be everyone's best friend, but you need to respect the fact that the bloke next to you's got what it takes to look after you, and he'll have your back when it matters.
Sounds like a footy team.
Yeah, it's a lot like a footy team. I work in AFL and NRL teams, and it is a familiar environment.
You want confidence that the guy next to you is not going to leave a gap, or if there is a gap, that he's going to close the gap.
100%.
Holy heck, I've just seen this. It's just over 30 minutes right now, so apologies for that. Doing good, though. I wish, I'm sure this is only an hour long, this interview, so I'm surprised. I just looked at that now. I don't think I looked at it when I first did my first part of the reaction. But, yeah, really enjoying this. There's lots of stuff in that and there. I do think that 500 kilos worth of equipment for the Halo jumps that I spoke about, I think that might have been a slip of the tongue. I can't see anybody gearing up and having 500 kegs worth of kit. Maybe 50 plus, 50, 60, 70, 80 kegs worth of kit and equipment that guys might have had. But yeah, I think there was just a slip of the tongue. So hopefully people aren't raising their eyebrow or judging Moff on the back of that. I genuinely think that was just a slip of the tongue, and he probably meant to say some other number, but 500 came out. Unless my ears are bloody not working properly either, and maybe I misheard it. So anyway, it's talking about the decision to retire. Okay, so that's why that part in terms of the guys, the two retirement ages 55, and then when the younger guys tell you you're moving a bit slow or you're looking a bit slow. Anyway, appreciate your time. Thank you for your support. There's lots to digest and pick at in here. I could talk for ages just on what I've heard Harry Moff talk about, but I think I'll park that there for now. As always, the message is the same, everybody, regardless of whatever challenges, trials that you may be going through. Maybe you're getting told you're moving a bit slow in whatever area or space it may be. Keep staying in the fight, but being mindful and cognizant of what that fight is and picking and choosing those battles, and where you can, doing what you know and feel is right for you and or for the team. If you're part of a team environment and there's maybe conversations like what Moff has had with other people in that team. If it's just but if it's some personal stuff that you or somebody that you know is going through, just stick at it, Keep putting one foot in front of the other. Take one day at a time. Keep staying in the fight. I promise you things can do and will get better. So just keep turning up. I promise you they'll get better if you want them to as well. So that's key. You definitely have to want things to get better, and I promise you that they will. The sun will shine again. As always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, here's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.